Yeah. I'll deal with you later, Chief.
O'Malley, the meeting is now on.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the October 6, 2025 meeting of the Halifax Board of Police Commissioners for the Halifax Regional Municipality. I'd like to call the meeting to order and share the land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. Madam Clerk, in terms of the roll call and quorum, would you like to facilitate that for us?
Yes, Chair. Although typically, as part of a virtual meeting, we also do a video and mic check. So if you wish to do that, you can, and then that way we can confirm quorum. I know that we do have 6 commissioners present at the moment, so that does mean that we have quorum.
Thank you. So moving on, item number 2, community announcements. Any community announcements, commissioners?
I have my town hall tomorrow night. I know on the 8th. So
would you like to share some? Would you like to share some particulars about the time and the location, Commissioner Hinch?
So it is this coming Wednesday. It's at the Needham Recreational Center on Devonshire Ave. It's from 6 until 7. But mostly we'll go probably from 6 till 8 for questions and things of that. So yeah. So I hope people show up.
Thank you for sharing. Any other community announcements? All right, let's move on to approval of the minutes. I don't believe there was any thing to approve from our previous session. So item number 4, approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Clerk, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Sorry, Chair, this is Yemi Akinoju. I'm not sure. Bill has his hand up. I don't know if he's needing help connecting or not.
Commissioner Moore, are you able to speak, Commissioner Moore? It doesn't show that your mic is off.
I would suggest that if Commissioner Moore is having technical issues, that he reach out to the City Hall IT team or give me an email. Email me.
He says he's going to leave and come back on.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Marty.
Okay.
And Chair, with respect to additions or deletions, there are no additions or deletions from the clerk's office for this meeting.
Very good. Do commissioners have any additions or deletions or modifications to the order of the business? All right, barring none, can we have a mover and a seconder to approve the order of business? Commissioner Akindoju, thank you. And Commissioner Hinch, thank you for seconding. All those in favor signify by saying yes. And no objections. Motion carried. Going on to item number 5, business arriving out of the minutes. There's none there. Call for declaration of and conflict of interest. Item number 6, commissioners, does anyone have a conflict of interest to declare as a result of an agenda item today? All right, barring none, we will move on to item number 7, consideration of deferred business, which there is none. Moving on to number 8, correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Item 8.1.1. Madam Clerk, is there any correspondence received that we'd like to make note of?
Chair O'Malley, no correspondence was received for this meeting, and I can confirm that no petitions were received as well.
Thank you kindly. Commissioners, are there any petitions that you'd like to make note of? All right, I think we will skip down to item 10.1. There's nothing formally for 9 and item 10. So we're very fortunate today to have a presentation by the Executive Director of Community Safety. Rachel Bohm, and she's going to give us an overview of the tremendous work that the community safety team has been working on and plans to release into the community in the coming weeks and months. Commissioner or Executive Director Bohm, would you like to take the floor?
Thank you very much. Just, Andrea, we can cue my slides. Thank you for this opportunity to share the work of HRM's Community Safety Business Unit. So we have responsibility for many of the parts of the public safety strategy that you can find on the HRM website. That's a strategy that takes us from 2023 to 2026. And the three pillars of that strategy are community-led public safety leadership, a broader spectrum of responses, and a center of responsibility for collective impact. And we have responsibility for many of the programs that are non-law enforcement public safety domain. Next slide, please. One of the strategies you'll find in the public safety strategy is preventing violent extremism. So this is something you're seeing probably in the news on a daily basis, incidents happening across the country that relate to violent extremism. Halifax is taking a preventive approach. We're fortunate to be one of 10 pilot sites for the Public Safety Canada funded Prevention Academies. So you'll be hearing more about this work in the coming year. Essentially, it's building community leadership to prevent violent extremism and engaging with a lot of different partners, grassroots partners, to find ways to work with citizens for a safer city. For example, we recently held a youth forum just a couple of weekends ago. We had a diverse group of 30 youth who made concrete recommendations for ideas they had to prevent violent extremism among youth. Next slide, please. We have done a lot of training, and that was a key recommendation that was part of our strategy. We have trained more than 400 HRM staff and partners over the past year in nonviolent crisis intervention. So this builds capacity across our community. These are staff and partners who have a high exposure to individuals in the community who may escalate into violent situations. This training gives them skills in de-escalation and violence prevention, thereby preventing incidents that lead to hospitalizations or law enforcement having to become involved. And we are strongly monitoring and evaluating the outcomes of this training process so that we can, justify further expansion of this program. Next slide, please. We're working on a senior safety strategy, and we're still in the engagement phase of this work. We are identifying improvements that can support increased safety of seniors in our communities, and we are engaging with the African Nova Scotia, Mi'kmaq, and other communities facing disproportionate safety challenges. And we're refining the core themes from all of those engagements into a strategy that will inform our next iteration of the public safety strategy, and look for further report and recommendations related to senior safety in the coming year. Next slide, please. We have a number of our staff who carry out safe public spaces programming that includes, we can do community safety assessments. So we, from time to time, citizens raise concerns about safety in some of our parks or other public spaces. It might relate to gender related violence or risk of violence, and we can go do an assessment or walk arounds with groups of people to identify safety improvements that could occur. It also involves delivering training, education, and capacity building for municipal staff and residents. And there's a piece of this project that addresses commercial sexual exploitation and building capacity amongst service providers and those working with youth and other people at risk to identify and respond to that form of violence. Next slide, please. As a result of the Mass Casualty Commission and other work, intimate partner violence has had a lot of attention for good reason in the Halifax region and across our province. And our community safety team also contributes to the broadening of municipal responses to IPV. We're working to increase capacity to help individuals navigate toward services to support their needs. And this is integrated in all of the work that we do. And we consider the IPV lens when developing new programs, such as our work with homelessness, our crisis response, and our Safe City programs. Next slide, please. We have an active youth services strategy. They have formed a child, youth, and family response table to guide this work. That table tackles some very collaborative approach to some complex youth situations. They can help address solutions for housing, food insecurity, problems at school. It really is multifaceted approach to help youth. And they help about 5 youth each time they meet through those types of case management initiatives. We do a lot of training similar to the NBCI training, but a little broader here, where we train service providers in trauma-informed care, conflict resolution, restorative justice. And we collect and share data on youth violence to inform actions. We respond to critical incidents of violence and try to interrupt and prevent violence. Addressing trauma, which is a root cause of violence, by increasing youth access to counseling and outreach services, and expanding street outreach to build relationships with youth and help meet their needs. In this way, we can work upstream to promote safety and reduce risk factors for youth. It's also part of our responsibility to incorporate a youth lens into all of the community safety initiatives and then other business activities of the HRM. Next slide, please. This is a picture of our community mobilization team. These are volunteers, and we have a small number of staff who mobilize volunteers across 7 communities with the necessary skills, tools, and knowledge to handle community crises safely and effectively. We operate currently in Mulgrave Park, Halifax Central North, Spryfield, and Preston Township, including Lake Loon, Cherrybrook, East Preston, and North Preston. Next slide, please. A little more detail about the CMT. They support communities during critical incidents, offering immediate assistance and emotional support. They address short-term and long-term needs by providing trauma-informed support and resources during and after crises. And they employ a community debrief coordinator who can build community capacity in violence prevention. And especially, this is very grassroots driven. So the needs of the community, whatever the needs of the community are, being responsive to them in terms of what their concerns are with violence prevention in their neighborhoods. Next slide, please. Some stats about the CMT teams, and big shout out to our very active volunteers. As you can see here, almost 1,000 training hours. That group of individuals, very dedicated volunteers, meeting almost 300 hours, and 16 community events, 27 partnerships with neighborhood and community organizations to meet needs at the community level and prevent harm that might come out of violence in communities. Next slide, please. So community safety also has an active team working in homelessness. We work in designated and undesignated encampments. There are currently about 100 people living rough in the HRM. Our outreach and compliance teams work in lockstep with neighborhoods, encampments, citizens, and housing partners to address urgent needs, ensure safety for all residents, and connect individuals to shelter and housing. Currently, we're updating our framework to address homelessness in the HRM as situations are changing and there are more shelter beds available than there were a couple years ago. So we're really kind of changing our focus from helping people survive outdoors to encouraging people to be matched to appropriate shelter and temporary housing options. Over the last couple of years, the numbers of people living rough have dropped by about 50%. So that is good news. Next slide, please. We also have our AIM team that is primarily geared to supporting people living rough and in shelter and providing an alternative to calling police for issues that arise on the street or in encampments or in the shelter system. So the AIM team can be called in to resolve conflicts or de-escalate situations that might lead to violence or harm. We can provide referrals to needed services. Sometimes people show up at a neighborhood location or an encampment with absolutely nothing to stay warm or without food or shelter. We can transport people to shelter or provide what they need to stay safe in the short term. We have a dedicated cell phone number, and we work closely with law enforcement and other partners to get to people wherever this help is needed. AIM primarily focuses on the evening after hours when a lot of the other supports in the community may be closed, so they operate evenings, overnight, and weekends. They respond to over 120 incidents every month. Next slide, please. Just launched today, you'll be hearing about this in the news this week. We have launched our CARE service. This is a community-based trauma-informed alternative response service for in-person crisis support. Individuals 16 years of age and older in non-emergency distress. We provide non-clinical support, including crisis de-escalation, safety planning, safe transport, and referrals to community resources. This is the vehicle you might see out on the road in the pilot area. This is a 2-year pilot. Next slide, please. Being a pilot, it is right now limited to a very specific geographical area so that we can test the impact of this. Does it reduce the pressure on other emergency services and police? And so our designated geographical area is Dartmouth inside the Circumferential Highway, Woodland, and Cole Harbor, Monday to Friday, initially 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then as of January, hours will expand to 24/7 in the same area. It will be independently evaluated. And the goal is to determine whether this is an effective alternate response approach. It has been tested in other communities and found to be extremely helpful. So we are optimistic that this will take a load off our law enforcement and other emergency services. The service is triaged through 211, who will dispatch the team, and the frontline response is being delivered by Souls Harbor during this pilot. Next slide, please. You may have also noticed in the public safety strategy a discussion of a stabilization center. This would be an alternate response for people, for intoxicated individuals, providing alternative to prisoner care facilities, a secure and supervised site where people can recover, would reduce pressure on emergency services, both police prisoner care facility and emergency departments. And it provides a really nice opportunity to connect individuals with appropriate health and social services, avoids criminalization of behaviors. However, space has been a barrier, and it is why the team is not yet active. We have had a difficult time finding leased space for the service. And so we're currently working on some strategies, changes to our model that may address this space barrier. So hopefully we'll have good news on that in the coming months. Next slide, please. Another pending program that we hope will be launching in the next few months is a drop-in center for individuals experiencing homelessness. So this would be an option for people to shelter from the elements during the day, where they can access support services, food, water, hygiene, and a sense of community, an opportunity for them to rest, and potential for a place to store some of their belongings. Sometimes when you're in shelter, there's just nowhere to store your things. And it is an HRM government and Nova Scotia partnership. Shelter Nova Scotia is the identified service provider, and the location has been identified, but we're still in the final stages of planning. So more on that to come. I think that is my last slide. No, one more, sorry. Food security. So HRM does have a small food security team, and we work on improving community food access, especially to areas that would be considered food deserts, where there aren't a lot of options for people to access nutritious, affordable food. We've actually brought about 18,000 kilograms of food into communities with this type of need. We work really hard to increase capacity of communities to establish food security, and that could be through community gardens and urban food production. And we have a program to build readiness for emergency situations such as hurricanes, extended power outages through our emergency food response program. And we have provided 1,500 emergency food kits to vulnerable citizens who might have a difficult time with food security in a time of extended crisis. We also provide grants for those beautiful community gardens that you see across the HRM. Next slide, please. And that is the end. Thank you so much for the time to share this great work that is underway, and thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Executive Director Bowen. Do we have an audio issue?
My
seem
apologies,
to-
Chair. The recording must have just accidentally got paused and I've resumed it.
No worries. Thank you kindly. Thank you very much for that. I'll give the commissioners an opportunity to ask any questions for clarification. I know this is content that you're very familiar with, but we wanted the opportunity for the members of today's public session to hear this directly from the Community Safety Program leadership team. Any questions from any commissioners?
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Deputy Mayor.
It's not really clarification, just very quickly a comment. We've come a long way in this municipality, and I am so proud of the work that this team is doing now, and especially with Rachel leading this team. I mean, Rachel, the fact that you're making the independent partner of violence a priority, as it should be, because we are in a crisis. That's fantastic. The after hours, the AIMS team, mobile engagement, the crisis assistance response team that we're launching today, CARE. I mean, you'll hear people, and those of us have been around for a while, I've heard people come to this particular meeting when we talk about the police budget, talking about, how do we stop police responding from some of these situations, these trauma situations, and the CARE team is a direct response to that. So very proud of that. The stabilization center, we need that space for sure, but looking forward to it. And that drop-in center too, for those that are experiencing homelessness. And the list goes on and on. So I'm really, really proud of the work, Rachel, you and your team that you're working with now. And, I really think, there's always more work to be done. Absolutely. But a pat on the back for this municipality going in this direction. And I think it's fantastic. So no question of clarification, Mr. Chair, just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other commissioners that would
I
like
just
to
want
make a
to
point?
echo Commissioner Mancini's comments because you know what, it's a long time coming. I'm happy to see that it's coming to fruition. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hinch. All right. Just as a point of clarification, so community safety is a separate program within HRM, separate business unit, and the budget that operates and supports that program is completely separate outside the board's purview. So we don't have any say. This is all by the courage and wisdom of regional council, and all these initiatives have been funded by regional council. I just wanted to make that clear that today's session that we're going to look at shortly relates to the policing services budgets only. I'm going to
Actually, Chair. Oh,
yes.
sorry, it's
Oh,
Vince here.
Commissioner. Yes.
Hi, sorry. Just as you were speaking, a question came to mind. Like the other commissioner said, thanks, Rachel, for all the work on this. I'm really looking forward to seeing all of this unfold. My question is the rate limiting step to all this. It seems to be getting the partners or getting the space as opposed to funding. So it sounds like the funding is there from the city. It's really getting the partners or the service providers or the space to actually deliver it. Is that a fair assessment, or am I missing something there?
Through the chair to the commissioner, are you speaking of the stabilization center?
The stabilization center, the CARE, which is a pilot that is geographically specific at the moment, as opposed to, I mean, I guess where I'm going with this is, if we were trying to say we needed more resources or we needed more funding, the impression I get from your presentation is that it's not so much the need for resources at the moment, but rather your team is going through this in a deliberate way to make sure it's done correctly through the pilot. And for those services that we need partners for, we're still in the process of identifying those partners or identifying those we're trying to get those spaces.
Yeah. For the CARE team, it is to pilot, ensure effectiveness before, we have looked at what has happened in other jurisdictions. So we're testing that model in Halifax. We may need to tweak it so it's easier to focus in on an initial geographical area. We wanted an area that had both HRP and HRD, RCMP. So that's the goal there. And with the stabilization center, we do have a willing partner, and we do have funding. It is difficult to lease space for services like this. There's a lot of stigma around, what the population might bring to neighborhoods, and therefore there's sometimes difficulty in securing landlords willing to provide space. We do think we might have a workaround to that. So, yeah, and there are always budgetary considerations. So, when we want to expand a program, we do want evidence that it is effective, and so pilots give us an opportunity to show council, what can be done before expanding it out to a full-scale program. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have any points of clarifications or questions for community safety leader? All right, let's move on to 10.1.2. And I get the privilege of just sharing a few slides. Maybe we could ask that the slides be brought up. And I'm just going to give an update on two particular areas. Excellent, thank you. So I wanted to take a minute to review a couple of topic areas. It's only going to take about 5 minutes just to give some context to some history over the last few years. So the first topic is around a defund report that was requested and produced by the board back several years ago. So during that process, a committee was formed to review relevant research and conduct community engagement in order to produce a definition of what defunding means, an overview of where the research stands, and including some jurisdictional scans across Canada, other municipalities and such, as to what people are doing in this area. and a summary of what defunding could look like in Halifax. So the report was received 2022, and it contained 36 recommendations, the majority of which have been acted on or in the process of being actioned by the appropriate body that has jurisdiction over the recommendation, which is not always the board. So for example, many of the recommendations related to traffic enforcement and traffic safety, which would be the mandate to either regional council or the province. So this slide's a snapshot of some of the recommendations that either relate directly or indirectly to the board's mandate. On police training, the board's new policies speak to several new training requirements. For example, the board's ARV policy requires authorized ARV operators to successfully complete an approved ARV operator qualification program, and as well to maintain the ARV operator qualification. All the operators must participate in regular training and exercising to ensure proficiency and safety as it relates to the ARV operations. The board's policy on encampments requires training to be reflective of the guiding principles in the regional council's framework to address homelessness and to consider tactics that aim to reduce any re-traumatization. A policy on use of force and body-worn cameras are also under development, and both will speak to training requirements. These two particular policies will be coming in the near future. Recommendation number 6 in the defund report was to put policies online, and I'm pleased to say that HRP began this process in the spring of 2023. Next slide, please. Thank you. The board's work plan speaks to many new policies that the board has requested, which are being produced and adopted. For example, in the past year, the board has produced new policies in areas such as off-duty and extra-duty policing, policing of encampments, armored rescue vehicle, which I just referenced, and when the chief is required to report important information to the board, also known as a critical point policy. As I said, a use of force policy is also being developed, as is a body-worn camera policy. The board has also requested a policy related to the Sexual Assault Review Committee, which provides investigative oversight to sexual assault cases. Recommendations 10 and 13 speak to legislative reforms, and last year, a formal review of the Police Act was formally requested by Regional Council. Rachel spoke to the work being done on detasking, which of course is core to the defund report. This aligns with Action 2.1 in the Public Safety Strategy to develop a community crisis response service for the municipality, which we are immensely grateful for HRM for funding, Regional Council, and for the hard work that Community Safety has done to get it to the point of operationalization. We're all very excited about that. Next slide, please. I already referenced our encampment policy, which was passed earlier this year, and that commits to a human rights approach to managing encampments. All of this work speaks to the ways in which the board is exercising its full governance authority and oversight, which is another recommendation of the report. This work is being done in accordance with a new policy bylaw for the board, which was adopted by Regional Council last year. Next slide, please. Another important report was received by the board last year with recommendations on lessons learned from the closing of 4 encampments in 2021. This report includes 37 recommendations, 13 of which directed specifically to the board. I'm pleased to say that each of the board's recommendations either have been actioned or are in the process of being actioned. The core recommendation to develop a policy directing the chief to share important policing information with the board, which I referenced on this slide, was adopted in June. I spoke to an encampment policy a few times. An encampment policy was adopted in September, and it was out for public consultation over the summer months. And this aligns with the human rights approach recommended in the report. We're also regularly reviewing our policies. In fact, just last week, we reviewed several of our procedural and administrative policies, which we'll be replacing with an updated policy. Next and last slide, please. I've already spoken to several of the recommendations on this slide. The psychological safety of our officers is, of course, of the utmost importance to our board, and we receive annual updates on this topic. I'll wrap this up by saying that since I became chair earlier this year, the board has been involved in a rigorous policy development process, and I expect that process to continue as we adopt policies recommended from various reports and that relate to important issues that arise in the community. We'll now move to the public feedback on HRP's proposed service enhancements and RCMP resource request, which you can find on the Board of Police Commissioners main webpage. You go there, you can click under the September 2024, 2025, September 24th, 2025, at the top of the page. Then you can click items 10.1 to review these requests. So we'll have the public consultation on the Halifax Regional Police's 26-27 proposed operating budget and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Halifax Regional Detachment 26-27 resource requests. Speakers can participate for a maximum of 5 minutes. Please keep your comments respectful, on topic, and directed to the chair. The clerk will announce when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your time is completed. All speakers are participating using Zoom and needed to pre-register by the deadline, which I believe was 10 a.m. this morning. And right now, I believe we have 16 individual speakers who are going to be presenting. So we'll have we promoted, Madam Clerk, the first speakers?
If you can please list the first 2 speakers on the list, and they will be promoted by our producer.
Excellent, thank you. So we have Speaker Paxton Romana and Speaker Lou Campbell. I see Lou is there. Speaker. Are both speakers present?
Yes, our first speaker is in as Pax.
Oh, okay. First speaker, Speaker Paxton, you have the floor.
Hi, my name is Paxton Romana. I'm a resident of District 8. I'm speaking today to voice my opposition to any increases to police budget. Last year, 94 vacant positions were funded before the budget increase, and I don't see how 18 new positions are necessary at all, especially as we continue to see a gross misuse of force by police against peaceful protesters, to us LGBTQ people, and others they're meant to protect. We should not give incentive to police to continue the acute harm they cause to vulnerable people in this city, and an increased budget encourages police to continue to act without integrity and without any transparency. It's a dishonor to the people living here to increase the budget at all. Increased funding to policing is also antithetical to the interests of this city. HRP highlighting a goal of building community partnerships with increased funding doesn't make any sense to me, just using common sense, because why not fund community organizations and initiatives directly then with the same money? Why would it be necessary to build partnerships with police with them holding that funding, if not to just intimidate community members, instead of allowing community members who know themselves best, who know their experiences, to be able to consent to where that funding is going, instead of having to build a strange relationship with the police force, who has a history of brutalizing community members. It's a means of intimidation. If HRP is truly committed to seeing the community thrive, then they should encourage that funding to go community organizations directly. Police also don't need increases in compensation. The starting wage for an officer is over 60K. That's much more than I make, and it's much more than frontline housing workers who face a lot of the same risks make. They rarely make over 55K a year, and their services actually prevent violence and keep us safe. Last year's budget proposal also asked me to care about the rising costs of ammunition, also citing inflation. I didn't care about it last year. I don't care about it this year. Less ammunition should encourage officers to use it conservatively and not fire at cars when it's not even the one they're looking for. There should be no increases to the already overinflated police budget, and it's not necessary. It doesn't help the city. I'd like to encourage this board to consider how funding could be used to enrich and honor the values of compassion and care that we need here. It's not through any increase in policing. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for clarification of the Speaker? All right, then we'll move on to the next. Thank you, Speaker. Much appreciated. We're going to move on to Speaker Lou Campbell.
Hi there.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. I find it a little funny that this meeting started with, or you just gave a presentation about some of the implementations of the defund report, but this meeting is about increasing the police budget. It's kind of in the name of the report to try and give less funding to the police. So whether or not you've done work to do any kind of implementation, the main goal of that report is to give less funding to the police. So if it's not clear, I'm obviously in opposition of that having a 2.7% increase this year. I've come to a lot of these meetings, so it is difficult for me to have any kind of confidence that this will be anything more than like rubber stamping the police's budget as it has been year after year. I hope to be surprised. Inflation is not an excuse to give them more money when tons of public services have to deal with cuts pretty much every year. Might be nice to try and make some like significant change by not actually allocating that funding rather than just like we've started this vague thing. Giving them less money is a real thing that you can do. So I've been doing some digging into like ways that I think that you, as your job as the board police commissioners, is to create policy and kind of monitor be oversight to the police. First of all, I looked into it. They have a $600 personal clothing budget with a further 1,000, that's tax-free, the 600, 1,000 of it can then be spent as well, but be taxed. So every cop gets $1,600 a year. They have a $200 cleaning allowance. Not really sure what that is even for. Most cops get paid above $100,000 a year. I make $40,000 as an artist. There's no municipal money for individual artists still in this. Every other major Canadian city has that. So continuous overfunding of the police is not doing our city any good. Also, visually, I've noticed just a huge amount of over-policing in this city. Just at homecoming at Dal, there was a cop on every single corner when the streets were empty. They're wearing thousands of dollars of riot gear that costs like literally thousands of dollars per police officer. And then you have the audacity to say that you're implementing things. It's crazy making to see as a person who lives in this city and cares about this city. I feel like the Board of Police Commissioners' job is to kind of provide oversight and also be a conduit for the public and the police. And I personally don't feel represented. I don't feel like the interests of the public are being represented or cared about. Just last year, a $600,000 ARV was purchased when there was massive public outcry not to do it. so it's difficult to come here year after year and just, I feel disrespected, frankly, because I don't see any meaningful changes. It's just continuous increases year after year after year. In 2023, public money was used to send the chief to Israel. Not only is that morally reprehensible, it is financially ridiculous. That's my tax money. So this kind of thing has got to stop. And I feel like it's your job to stop it. No other public service enjoys this kind of unquestioned financial support. It's not ethical. It's not fair. It's not just. And it's horrible to behold year after year. I go to protests where there's 40 people and there's 70 cops. It's a blatant waste. The waste that I witness every single year. And then again, they get an increase. Meanwhile, I'm just like struggling to make rent at times as an artist in this city. And there's people, homeless people on the streets constantly who don't have a place to live. So it's frustrating. And all I can hope with this meeting
8 seconds remaining.
Thank you. All I can hope with this meeting is that my passion and anger, though it might make you feel uncomfortable, it might make you feel defensive, I hope that it makes you think there is another way. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Speaker. Madam Clerk, can we promote the next two speakers to the meeting? B. McGregor and Libby Douglas.
Hi there. Thank you.
Hi there.
Good afternoon.
Is it going to be Speaker Douglas first?
Yes, please.
I understand that okay, thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay,
Speaker
thank you
Douglas.
and good afternoon. My name is Libby Douglas and I'm a board member of Alderney Landing, the theater, art gallery, market, and event center located in downtown Dartmouth. I also serve as the chair of Alderney's Safety Committee, and in these capacities, want to express the Alderney Landing Board's support for increased police resources. I would also like to briefly thank Rachel and HRM for offering the community safety training, which a staff member at Alderney Landing has taken. Firstly, let me provide the background for Alderney Landing's support for increased police services. Following COVID-19, there was a huge increase in safety-related issues at Alderney Landing. At Alderney Landing and the surrounding areas in downtown Dartmouth. To address these issues, as well as involve the local community, including residents, businesses, provincial and HRM officials, Alderney Landing started a safety committee and employed a human-centered design approach that involves those that have lived experience to identify solutions for problem solving. The number one issue that resulted from this exercise and involved over 70 community stakeholders was the immediate need for increased policing in the downtown and at Alderney Landing. I will now turn over to B. McGregor, CEO of Alderney Landing, to report upon where we were 2 years ago and where we are now and what has happened since. So thank you very much, and over to B.
Thank you, Libby. Everyone hear me okay? And thank you for the opportunity to speak in favor of the Halifax Regional Police budget. Thank you to the Board of Police Commissioners. Alderney Landing is a community not-for-profit organization led by an amazing volunteer board of directors. We produce 700 events a year, bringing 400,000 people to our theater, market, gallery, and events venue. So public safety is really of paramount importance to our community in the neighborhood. Each one of our events, just to be clear, so our large scale events, we do hire separately, police. We have a budget that we do that, and but we require police presence throughout the year. A couple of years ago, we did have a real crisis situation on our hands, where we had 2 to 3 incidents a day, ranging from theft to assault, a lot of assault issues, of which, even though we have our own facility monitor and we've worked hard within the community, there are times when we absolutely need the support of the police because they know how to deal with issues in a way that we just cannot. Our community police officer, Ian Walsh, has been an excellent addition to our area, and he has continually demonstrated compassion for all of the people in our community. He continues to provide excellent service and in a very large geographic area. The collective we required greater presence than was possible to provide. And at that time, the 2 to 3 incidents a day in our vicinity, the response was to call 911. And with that, there were obviously a lot of police cars being tied up and police officers' time with the response. And what that meant qualitatively is that there were numerous police officers being engaged reactively rather than proactively. And with the increase in the police budget, additional patrols then became possible. So it really moved us to more of a proactive approach. Today, we really have an excellent working relationship with HRP and through our community police officer, along with all of the partners and our facility monitor and the 70 volunteers within the community that came together to make a lot of progressive change. That essentially the extra patrols and the regular communication and the check-ins, we then brought our incidents from 2 to 3 a day down to 1 a week. When we have backed off of that and not had the police presence in the way that we need, which has all been very proactive, then we find ourselves in the same circumstance. So we have the data and the support to know that the regular policing is really what we need as a larger area in this community to have a safe place. So we strongly support the increase in the police budget. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, speakers McGregor and Douglas. Are there any clarification questions for the speakers by the commissioners? All right, let's move on. Thank you, speakers. Madam Clerk, would you like to promote the next 2 speakers?
Yes, I believe that is Christina Tellez, and we also have a Kai Gray. However, Kai Gray is not appearing on our attendees list. So if Kai could raise their hand, their Zoom hand, and we'll be able to know to promote you to the meeting.
Excellent, thank you. Well, Speaker Christina Tellez, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm speaking today to oppose the approval of the proposed Halifax police budget, which totals over $100 million. I'd like to highlight that this is not just a local issue here in Kjipuktuk. What we are witnessing here and around the world is the entrenchment of policing as a tool for colonial violence, and we have a responsibility to name that clearly. Policing in so-called Canada, including here in Kjipuktuk, has always been about protecting colonial structures, not communities. From the RCMP's origins in enforcing the Indian Act to current surveillance and criminalization of African Nova Scotians and Mi'kmaq land and water protectors, policing continues to target Indigenous people who assert their rights. And this colonial violence does not exist in isolation. A speaker earlier mentioned the previous police chief's visit to Israel. We see the violence here in Mi'kmaq mirrored in Palestine, where the Israeli state, armed and funded by Western powers, continues to violently occupy, displace, and police Indigenous Palestinians. When Mi'kmaq fishers and hunters are harassed for exercising their treaty rights, Palestinians are being bombed for demanding freedom. And we must recognize that these are the same structures. It's the same settler colonialism that is being upheld through the militarization of policing. And these connections are not abstract. The Canadian police forces, including municipal departments across Turtle Island, have trained with Israeli security forces. They exchange tactics and technology designed not to serve people, but to control and suppress them. These systems are shared globally, reinforcing the same hierarchies of power. So when we consider a police budget that exceeds $100 million, we have to ask, what are we really funding? We've heard today about a care team and a stabilization center. These are wonderful initiatives, but we've also heard that these are not initiatives coming from this police budget. They're separate. They're initiatives that this board is not considering whether to fund or not. Approving this budget is not a neutral act. It's a choice to continue funding systems rooted in colonial control, systems that have historically and continue to target Ilnu and African Nova Scotians here in Mi'kma'ki. I'd like to reference the report that Councillor Greg O'Malley mentioned, the report from the Board of Police Commissioners Subcommittee to define defunding police, which was chaired by Dr. L. Jones, and the report is titled Defunding the Police, Defining the Way Forward for HRM. And I'd like to highlight recommendations that directly correspond to this board and this board's assessment of HRP budget requests. While Councillor O'Malley highlighted recommendation 32, I'd like to draw the board's attention to recommendation 31, which is that the board, the police board and regional council should aim to bring per capita spending of the HRP more closely in line with cities of comparable size and population across Canada. So in their report, they saw that the per capita funding was considerably higher when compared to populations such or cities such as London, Ontario. And I can only imagine that with this increase in the police budget, that goal of having per capita spending on the police be comparable to other cities is only being more disproportionately represented. Recommendation 33 was that the police board and regional council should identify performance metrics for the HRP and the RCMP, which should be informed by the recommendations of that report, as well as the Wortley report and regional council's policing reviews and further community consultation. And that the approval of at least some portions of the annual police budget requested should show that they're actually achieving those metrics that are aligned with the reports that have come forward. So we're asking for the board to actually discern whether the police are meeting defunding goals and make judgments around the funding in relation to that. The report also has recommendations under improving and expanding participatory budgeting, which it feels apt for this during this public consultation. So recommendation 34 of that report was that regional council should ensure that funds diverted from the police budget. And so with this budget increase, I'm curious where those diverted, what those diverted funds even would be. But that if there are diverted funds, that they should be redistributed through participatory budgeting processes. And such processes should occur at multiple different levels, including geographic areas, subject matter area, community-specific areas, and a combination of these. So I'm curious about the participatory budgeting processes and what supposed funds could be said that are being diverted from this police budget as it continues to increase. Recommendation 35 was that regional council
3 seconds.
I'll just close by saying that to approve this budget is to choose colonial violence over community well-being. It's to disregard the multiple reports that have come forward from communities who are overrepresented in police violence. And it's to ignore the very recommendations that you commissioned by asking for that report. And it's to continue funding the surveillance and criminalization of the very people you claim to represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners to the Speaker? All right, thank you, Speaker. We're going to move on to the, before we do, Madam Clerk, speaker number 6, were we able to locate them?
No, we have not. My speaker
Okay.
support producer has attempted to reach them by email, but we have not heard from them. So if they
Okay.
are in the meeting, if they could please email clerks@halifax.ca to let us know that they are in the meeting and what name they've used to sign into the Zoom meeting so we know to promote them. So I would advise, Chair, that you move on to the next two speakers until we can receive confirmation from Kai.
Thank you. And I see that Speaker Abby Hodson is there. Is Speaker Nicole Corrado there?
A moment, I'll try promoting Nicole. So Nicole, I've attempted to promote you. You'll need to confirm that you want to be promoted There we go.
Excellent.
Hello. Can you hear me?
All right. Yes, Speaker Nicole Corrado, please, the floor is yours.
Yes. I was going to say, for one thing, I'm really happy that you're building a non-police option for people in a mental health crisis. That's so much better for people because as a person in the autism spectrum, the last thing I would want is police coming and managing things because they really.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm having a hard time hearing Nicole. I'm sorry, Nicole, we're having a
Oh,
hard time
sorry,
hearing you.
I'm in a bus, so I'm in a Montreal bus. I am planning on moving to Halifax for studies, and as a person on the autism spectrum, I'm quite happy that you guys are starting to have a non-police option for people in crisis. I think that's absolutely wonderful. I also would agree with reducing the police budget, because if you reduce the budget for police, you can reallocate those funds to alternatives like this pilot project in Dartmouth that would have, non-police and have civilians attend calls that don't involve violence. So say a call where a person might be neurologically dysregulated or in meltdown, they could have a civilian attend instead of police. That would be so much better. So yes, that's definitely something that I am looking forward to, and it makes me feel better about moving to Nova Scotia. I agree 100% with defunding, because you could take a lot of those funds and move them to alternative services. And that's the only way you're going to be able to fund the alternative services, which actually save money in the long term, because the alternative services cost a lot less, because you don't have to pay for ammunition, which costs a lot of money, by the way. You don't have to pay for armored vehicles. You don't have to pay for all the expenses that police have, and the civilian agencies can do the jobs that the police are not trained or signed up to do. I would love to see more money into animal services, for example. I would love to see Halifax fund Hope for Wildlife. I'd love to see more alternatives looked into, for people, for animals. It would save so much money. It's a much better way to use tax dollars is to put them into the alternative programs. Here in Montreal, we have something called Sauvetage, so it's like volunteer search and rescue. That kind of thing also helps police. But yeah, I'm trying to figure out if that program in Dartmouth, is that program in Dartmouth related to the program is it similar to the copy from the program in Toronto, the Toronto Community Crisis Service? Because I know Toronto has something called the Toronto Community Crisis Service. And it sounds like it's similar. And the Nova Toronto Community Crisis Service is now all across Toronto, and it's an absolutely excellent program. I think that was all I was going to say.
Thank you, Speaker.
Did you catch all that?
We did. We did. I could attest that I did hear all of your words over the bus sounds. But even though they were, yeah, no, we could hear you clearly. All right. Thank you, Speaker. We're going to move on to, unless there's any questions of clarification for Speaker Nicole Corrado. Barring none, we'll move on to Speaker Abby Hodson. Speaker, the floor is yours.
Hello. Yeah, I'm speaking against any increases to the police budget. The logic is just really not not lining up. If the load is beginning to be alleviated by the care team for law enforcement, then we should be looking at reducing this budget, not increasing it. Yeah, the irony of you citing the defund report when this is about an increase to the budget is very yeah, it's kind of absurd. And yeah, this meeting started with the presentation addressing that began by addressing violent extremism in our community. And as a trans person, the most violent extremism I've experienced is at the hands of police. So yeah, again, if you're wanting to address that, demilitarize the police. Our calls are consistently for both investment and community supports and divesting funds from the police. And yeah, I want to know how you reconcile your ideas of democratic process year after year, when year after year the majority of your constituents oppose budget increases to the police services, and you just rubber stamp it. So it's pretty devastating and disheartening to feel this kind of crumbling of our democratic system and democratic processes enacted by each member of this board year after year. So yeah, that's really all I've got. I'm gonna keep on coming to these meetings and keep on hoping that you listen to us. I know I heard at the beginning that you are making some efforts, and that needs to be stronger. So cheers.
Thank you, Speaker Hodson. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Speaker Hodson? All right, thank you, Speaker. Let's move on to Speaker Carmel Farah Bakash. Did I say that correctly? And as well, I believe as well, we're going to promote into the session Speaker Ziggy Kirch, correct?
Hi, folks. Can you hear me okay?
Both are here. Yes, we can. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Carmel Farahbash. I'm calling in from District 7. I have the privilege of working within youth work generally, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about that in relationship to this proposed budget and focus on the over-criminalization of marginalized youth and the over-criminalization of poverty that we see demonstrated through national and local data. And I also want to know, as we're kind of moving into the conversation, that at the organization that I work with is an organizational policy that we don't engage with the police. And that was a policy created by the youth that access our services. And so I think it's important to bring their voice into the room, as, of course, they are often underrepresented in conversations about cities that they live in. I wanted just to speak about some of the presentations that started this meeting. Thank you to Rachel's presentation. It was refreshing to see youth voice contributing to these conversations. I agree with the multifaceted approach to better understand big concepts like violence and safety and what it means to build safer spaces in and across the city. I also agree that social services are, when they're reflective of the communities that they aim to serve, that is where the funding is needed, not in bolstering an already extremely large policing budget. A few things that I noted through the presentation is that CMT is a primarily volunteer team. It's amazing to hear about their work always, and the community-led efforts in community grassroots violence prevention. I deeply feel like funding projects like this or like AIM build capacity and make direct and actionable change, unlike the context of policing that I have been engaged and observed and impacted by. Echoing a past speaker's point, it's unfortunate that this isn't coming from a reduction in the police budget, but rather a separate operational budget. I also appreciated hearing about the adoptions of some of the defunding report. But I do want to name that with the ultimate goal of detasking, I can't understand or rationalize a yearly growing police budget and the hiring of new officers or funding police positions. The second pillar of defunding is one that really speaks to me, and it is truly just the aim at detasking the police and retasking more appropriate community services. This is something that I would love to see in the municipality and something that I think is a foundational goal of the report. Pillar number 4 also looks specifically at the financial reforms aimed at the police budget and also ensuring there being clear performance metrics and encouraging public participation in municipal budgeting with the ultimate intention of decreasing budgetary allocations and allowances to police and increasing allocations to community-based social services. And I really would love to see some direct metrics that speak to the ways in which the HRP are engaging with these realities, as this was a report, of course, commissioned by this group. And so it feels increasingly important as time goes by that we see an evaluation. As a person who works within the nonprofit sector, evaluation is a way that we grow and understand our impact. And it feels disheartening that the police seem to have much different expectations around their evaluation metrics and the ways in which they engage in accountability around use of public funds. I want to speak about a few different studies that I think are relevant to this conversation. In 2022, a study titled Black Youth in the Criminal Justice System, we see first voice storytelling that shows participants across sites identify school as a key place where Black youth have their first contact with the criminal justice system and policing. Of course, this is heartbreaking, as school should be a place of learning. This connection is well documented and often referred to as the school to prison pipeline. The other most commonly mentioned pathway stems from anti-Black racism in neighborhood policing and over surveillance of neighborhoods. We see examples of this in the HRM. And in the study, a parent in Halifax actually shared that their kids, 13 and 14 years old, were coming home from a park. They walked on the lawn of a building and were playing. Building occupants got nervous, thought they were trying to break in, and police came with their guns out and said they were arresting them for home invasion. And so this is a story I've heard too often from parents and families that I work alongside about police misunderstanding children playing and using extreme force. This is something that is incredibly traumatic to young people and really changes their bodies and brains. And it has a lasting impact on their developmental growth. And it's very, very hard. Great. I think just there's been a lot of studies that I've sent to not only counselors, but also members of this committee, and I'm happy to send those studies as well. There are so many reports that speak to the importance of bolstering community resources and detasking the police, including our very own defunding report. I really urge on council to reflect on these recommendations, as well as recommendations from the TRC, recommendations from the Toronto-based report, Rethinking Community Safety, from the Wortley report. There is just so much data and first voice storytelling that supports the voices of so many here speaking today, but also folks that do not find these kind of meetings accessible and can't have their voices heard in this context. I also do want to respond to comments made earlier just about how consultation processes work when establishing if policing is the right choice. And I'm often a member at those tables working for a youth nonprofit. And I often find that there are so many voices missing from those tables, including the most impacted. So often a lack of youth engagement, queer and trans engagement, African, Nova Scotian, and Mi'kmaq engagement. And so the data that is collected from those tables often aren't representative of the folks that are experiencing the most violence in their community and definitely not in the room. So I just wanted to close with that and encourage folks to engage with these pre-existing reports and lean on the community experts that are asking for detasking.
Thank you, Speaker. Are there any questions for the Speaker? All right, thank you, Speaker. We're going to move on to Speaker Ziggy Kirch, who I noted here is president of SUNSCAD.
Hello, can everyone hear me all right?
Yes, we can, Speaker. Floor is
Super.
yours.
Yeah, my name is Ziggy Kirch, and I'm here to speak not only as a student myself, but as the president of the Student Union of NSCAD University. To put it shortly, we are against any increases in the police budget. As hard as police may try to put on the facade of progressiveness, policing as it exists in so-called Canada is founded on colonialism and white supremacy, and it's ultimately a tool to protect property above lives. Study after study in place after place shows that increasing policing increases crime, and it perpetuates cycles of abuse that traumatize, kill, and incarcerate, particularly the most marginalized in our communities. Rather than funneling more money into the HRP and RCMP, council would do better to allocate those resources to services that have been shown to actually reduce crime and incarceration in our communities, namely investing in things like housing, education, addiction support services that operate on a harm reduction model, and mental health crisis responses that don't rely on institutionalization and incarceration as a first response. Police do not stop crime. In fact, the only time they ever really act is after a crime has been committed. We know they do not meaningfully deter crime. The rise in intimate partner violence, which has been cited as a reason for increased funding, will not be addressed by more cops. Better supports for community, better housing options, and more affordable living would do far more to reduce instances of intimate partner violence, and it would benefit communities as a whole. As students, we are often forced into unsafe living situations due to the lack of affordable housing and high price of tuition. These are the kinds of strains that leave vulnerable people trapped in unsafe situations. The weight of debt, lack of options and opportunities will keep people trapped in abusive relationships, and police presence often does little more than escalate already unsafe situations. Similarly, when my fellow students share their experiences with mental health crises and trying to access help, which is what we encourage people to do when they're struggling, the first response being police only serves to further traumatize those individuals. The increase in hate crimes in recent years has also been used to justify more police. As a trans person representing a union with a very large trans and gender nonconforming population, we are among those particularly impacted by this increasing hate. What would help us is better education for politicians to stop using us as scapegoats, and again, housing, community support, addiction services, non-carceral mental health support. The police do not make us safe. We know that community is what keeps us safe. Ultimately, this is all to say that we know what our communities need, and it's not more money for police. Those resources would be much more effectively utilized on the services that I've outlined: housing, care, support, not escalation, and not police. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Speaker. Are there any points of clarification for the Speaker? All right, Madam Clerk, could we promote the next two speakers, Speaker Kay McDonald and Speaker Nancy Hunter?
Kay McDonald is in the meeting, sir.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think both have joined the meeting. Speaker Kay McDonald, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hi, everyone, again. My name is Kay McDonald. I'm a queer, trans, African, Nova Scotian, Acadian artist, activist, and youth programmer. I will say I don't really have like a best tactic to employ for my communication style today. I feel like I've freestyled before and just spoke from my heart. I've also provided lots of research. So today I'm just gonna try and talk about the things that make the most sense. I'm here to express my annual opposition to the HRP and RCMP budget increases. I believe that policing has shown itself inefficient in crime prevention and has not proved a generative or care-based community service. There are tons of folks facing houselessness despite the numbers that have been shared with us today. I feel like in my lifetime, I've never seen so many houseless folks in the city. Not only are those folks facing a lack of stable housing or access to long-term housing, there's also an intersection of medical and mental health and substance issues or crises happening that we don't have the systemic structure to support. I believe that a better use of municipal funds would be pretty much anything, but largely, I think a better use of municipal funds would be to pour into third spaces that we're so desperately lacking: long-term housing, early childhood, education and spaces, senior and elderly supports, as well as adequate medical services. Policing has a long history, and I actually think it's radical for us to remember the historical roots of that and to talk about it contemporarily. Policing's roots are in colonial violence and murder of Black and Indigenous communities. Statistically, these historical purposes are still the ways in which policing functions today. And clearly, I don't support funding that. What is the actual return of investment on policing? Can we speak to that clearly? What do we as community members get in return? Need I remind y'all that statistically, HRP was in the practice of stopping Black men between the ages of 18 to 35 6 times more than anybody else. We've seen police come through African Nova Scotian communities completely kitted and militarized out, removing children from their homes in the middle of the night, kicking their doors in, really similar to the Chicago ICE raids that we just saw, right? Again, reminding us of the interconnected nature of colonial violence, right? I'm not free of that violence until other people are free of that violence, until we change this pattern of violence. I condemn any service, particularly the RCMP, that's role is to interrupt Indigenous land defenders protecting natural resources here in this territory. Natural resources such as the forests in Unama'ki and the Bay of Fundy for uranium mining. I would love to know how much money goes into interrupting land defense, when in reality, we need this land, right? We don't get to have these meetings. We don't get to have cops if we don't have land. So it's really important that we recognize that these are finite resources and that we're lucky that they exist here. All in all, there are tons of reports that exist, right? I don't have to pull out any data or stats. Y'all can find them yourselves. They're in the Wortley report, they're in the defunding the report. You can revisit the actions of HRP in response to the banning of street checks. I would encourage folks to rerun that history back for y'all, that contemporary history of what happened there, the violence that African Nova Scotians faced in response to the banning of street checks, because it was no longer a legal tool that people could use. Revisit the happenings of August 18, in case you are familiar with how the police are used in this territory. I will never support an increase in HRP or RCM budgets. I do not believe that this is the way forward. I do not believe that more money in policing contributes to a beautiful and full future for anybody. I'm incredibly invested as a lifelong resident of this territory with ancestral legacy here in how other people are treated, right? And how all living things exist and survive here. And I do not think that pouring more money into policing when they already have a $100 million+ budget is really the vibe or the way forward to create a viable future. You know how many times I've rolled up on the police in community as somebody who acts as a witness or de-escalator. So there's a $103 million budget on the line, but I'm still offering community services for free in order to provide safety to my community members, in order to employ tactics the police actually don't have. Right? So number one, cut me the check, cut me the check. The other day when we were visiting Shannon Medima's office, a few community folks wanted to have a conversation. She was escorted out of her office by 5+ cops. How much did that cost? Understood. How much did that cost? I can't get a police escort. It's not for everybody, right? It's an internal service that is provided through taxpayers' money. I also think that these engagements at some point do become disrespectful, as somebody else has mentioned. How many times are we going to do this? If y'all do not take into consideration the things we say here, how can we be heard? What is the method that you would suggest that I then use to make sure that I know that the municipality is funding viable, fruitful, beautiful, care-centered futures for people who look like me and come from communities like me? That's it.
Thank you, Speaker. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Speaker Kay McDonald? Once again, thank you, Speaker. Speaker Nancy Hunter, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm one of these regulars that come every year, and I agree with so much of what has been said already by community members, and so I'll try and keep my points to be maybe not repeated and maybe some different points. I too think it's interesting that we started with these presentations and pats on the back for the work that you've done on the reports. I do think it's good that we're having these conversations, but I do want to make a couple of points about that. The defunding report, the Wortley, the August 18th, and the mass casualty reports that we all now say we like all came from community fights. None of them came from government. None of them came from the police. They came from community. And as such, I think if we are really going to evaluate these reports to say if we are really acting in the spirit and doing what they are telling us to do, we should have community evaluations, that the board should be going to the community, the people who brought this. We have so many experts in our community on all of these issues, and are they really being enacted in meaningful ways? I question that they are. And so that's one of the reasons that I don't think we should be increasing any funding. Of course, there is the ironic part about the defunding, and we continue to increase, both not in just in money, but in an increase of what I call the militarization of police. I also want to say that while you may have a narrow scope of what you can do as a Board of Police Commissioners, every decision that you make about funding for police affects public spending. So every dollar that you spend on policing and increasing policing is money that is not spent on fire services, the need for wildfire training, for example, mental health services, public transportation, traffic safety measures, the housing crisis and the affordability crisis that we don't talk often enough about. We're talking some about the unhoused, but we mostly talk about shelters and not housing. But we're not talking about the large percentage of population who have to make choices every day about food, about whether they heat their homes, about whether they can afford to get on a bus, whether they can, so many decisions that have to be made daily, which there's so little help for. And yet, the police budget, I think it's very interesting that it seems to be the one institution that never has to make any kind of cuts or look at their budget. They can just ask for more money every year for everything they need, and it is continually rubber stamped. I think that no other increases for police should happen based on what other people said, but also until you as a police board have gone through their budgets with a fine-tooth comb. Hire an independent accountant, an independent organizational expert, whatever resources are needed to analyze spending, performance, wages, overtime, etc. Monies that are budgeted but not used. We have a culture in this city that somehow police are sacrosanct and that their word, you ask them a question, they give you an answer and it's accepted with such little oversight. I want to know things. I want to know many things. I actually want you to know these things. I want to know where and in what capacity police are spending their time, and do they need to be there? I was driving down Jubilee Road after work on Saturday, and I saw 20 to 30 fully decked out in shiny black new clothes and armor from head to toe with these
30 seconds remaining.
with these expensive bikes. I'm an activist. I have never seen the amount of police as I've seen in my life at the protest against Tennis Canada. What is going on here? I want analysis on that money. We can't keep funding something we don't even know what they're doing. All right. See you next year, same time.
Thank you, Speaker. Are there any questions for Speaker Nancy Hunter? Thank you again, Speaker. Madam Clerk, could we, yes, we have Speaker Frank Hempel, and do we have Speaker Willa Oakes in the session now?
Frank is in the session. And I believe Will is probably just in the process of being promoted.
Okay. Well, perhaps we'll start with Speaker Frank Hempel, and then we'll go to Speaker Willa Oakes. Speaker Frank Hempel, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Frank Hempel. I live in District 8. I've seen many of you before. You've seen me before. I'm here again to speak in opposition to the increase in the police budget. It's very difficult to keep coming back to these conversations because this is such a, it's not a good method for having these conversations. And I've said this before, but I'm like, it's never going to move us forward to have one person at a time, just for a brief minute, say all of their feelings, and then for you to process that. So I'm hoping that in this police budget, we can have more meaningful conversations and find ways to connect outside of this forum to understand where folks are coming from. Because people are bringing a lot of really important perspectives about community and what they've seen working and what they've seen not working, and the way that violence impacts us all, and the role that police play in upholding and perpetuating that violence. Yeah, I think like there's so many things to be said. Like I want to acknowledge that it was like maybe 31 degrees today in October, which like is very unseasonably warm in a way that I'm sure many of you are also noting for this time of year. It has been like a very difficult summer with wildfires, with drought. There are so many pressing concerns that are emerging for this city, for Nova Scotia, for us on like a global level, that we are not taking the time to meaningfully address and to like give the proper attention that they deserve. And there's many reasons for that. But what is hard to reconcile is the like inability to meet these needs, the like ways that like the fire department is underfunded, like Halifax Water is like having to like hike their rates to a very unsustainable, unaffordable amount for most people. People are increasingly living in poverty. People are hungry. And those are problems that we're trying to solve. But at the same time, it's always that there isn't enough resources, that things will happen when they happen. But the police budget year after year continues to get funding increases, even when there is acknowledgement that the work that they have been tasked to do is being detasked to other community groups. They're still being funded in an increased way. Like, my question is, what is the hesitation towards a funding freeze on the police? To not saying like, oh, we're just going to keep funding it and we're going to increase it and we're going to do what they say, but to say we're going to take at least a year to look at the spending that they're doing, to look at the ways this money is being used, to do a proper in-depth evaluation of how this money is being spent and the impact it's having on community, for it to be going to police, how that impacts community, and for it to be taken away from community and given to police. It's not that we're not a rich city. We're not doing well. People are suffering. People are struggling. People are not able to make ends meet. And that is going to increase the societal problems that we have. It's going to increase tension in our communities. That like lack of resources, that like affordability crisis creates tension in our communities that can't be reconciled through policing. It can't be solved through policing. It is exacerbated through policing, through the ways that police engage with community, or if you don't want to acknowledge that, just the spending that is happening on police that is being taken away from other resources. And I know it is constantly this battle of those are different budget lines and those are different budget lines and that's a separate thing and police are over here and everything else is over there. But that's a budget. That's not how it works. That's not how money works. And I know that you know this. You are in this position because you care about budgets and you care about this city and you care about the people in your like communities. And so thinking about what would it look like for this year, right? It's been 5 years since 2020, for this year to take a freeze, to look at the way the money is being spent, to look at where it needs to be spent. I really want to address like fire, water, the ways that these are like becoming like huge issues in a way that we can't reconcile through like community discourse. We need firefighters because firefighters fight fire. We don't need police in the same way because we have healthcare professionals, we have social workers, we have community, we have food banks, we have all these other things to address societal issues, but we don't have a solution for the forest fires that are happening. We don't have a solution for the droughts that are happening and how that will continue to affect us in increasing, impacting ways as, you know, climate crisis becomes more of a
30
crisis.
seconds remaining.
So I'm just asking you, regardless of how you feel about policing as a general concept, the role that they play, the budget isn't budgeting in the way that it needs to. It's fiscally irresponsible. It's irresponsible to the community. Take this year, have a freeze, do some really like in-depth research on what we could spend that money on, and then let's have this conversation again. Let's come back to it when we have more info and not just these feelings of police, no, we need them, police, no, they're abusing communities. Like, what does it look like from a purely fiscal, you know, perspective? What are we going to do? Because it's not working. You know that. And these forums aren't going the way that they're like meant to go. So thank you for your time. Please consider what it would look like to have a freeze.
Thank you, Speaker. Are there any questions for the Speaker? By any of the commissioners, any points of clarification? All right. Thank you kindly. Have we have Speaker Willa Oakes?
Yes, Chair. They are in the meeting towards the bottom.
Yes.
I think they're probably
I
just
do-
turning on their camera.
Yeah, I see that. All right, Speaker Willa Oakes, the floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Willa Oakes. I live in District 8. I deeply oppose any and all increases to the Halifax Regional Police and HRM budgets. I think that what is so important and what has been touched on many times is that while this board is responsible for only looking at the police, I think that police do not exist in a vacuum. And I think it's like to get the community safety presentation and then for you to acknowledge that, like, well, that's a good presentation, but those aren't actually the things that this is about. I just feel like it's an extremely flawed way to go about things, is that we can't be pretending in any way that police are separate from anything else, that $1 towards the police is not a dollar taken away from any other service, and that I think that, I mean, I'm like very glad to see all of my peers here speaking against the budget. And I think that when I was watching the presentations from the two people that have spoken in favor, I get the impression that they think the world is going to end if the police don't get 2% more money. But I think, like the last speaker, it's like just saying no, just saying not this year, saving the city over $2 million and letting those funds go somewhere else where they are way, way, way more needed. Like, the world will not become a worse place. I can like absolutely guarantee that. Alderney Landing will not become a worse place. nowhere in Halifax will become a worse place. And if the police are so pressed about it, they can take a pay cut and they can make it work within their budget, like literally every other service is asked to do when they don't get the millions of dollars that they require. I would love to see this board use more evidence-based decision-making from evidence that does not come from the RCMP and the HRP. There are so many amazing and devastating resources that really just show exactly how the police are not what we need. The police will not end the intimate partner violence epidemic. They will not end food insecurity. They will not end the housing crisis. And every single dollar that goes to the police gets taken out from actually funding things that will actually address those crises. I genuinely don't believe that there are I don't think that any of you actually believe that having rich police officers in this city make it a better place. So I think that if the police are so pressed on getting whatever they need, the ones that make over $200,000 a year can take a pay cut. But I mean, and again, and I'll just also say, everybody else has been saying, to implement the defunding report, you need to defund the police. Also, I think going back to the police in a vacuum, your guys' responsibility in budget season is to assess the police budget requests and make a recommendation to council. I don't see why it couldn't be, you guys reject the request, you say, hey guys, to the police, make do with what you already have, and then make a recommendation that the community safety team would do better. You think that the community safety team, the non-carceral responses to crises, would do better with that money, because I'm just so tired of the police budget going up every single year, despite the crises getting worse. Everything, I don't know. I just think that the police are the only service in this city that don't have these tangible metrics that they need to meet to get a budget increase. It's things get worse. The police say they need more money because things are getting worse. They get more money. Things get worse. And it's somehow them failing at their jobs is how they justify monopolizing more and more and more of the city's funding. So yeah, I think that
A second for Maney.
I think that mainly nothing bad will happen if you guys say no to this request. I guarantee the police will be fine because they have way too much money. They have vacant positions that are funded. They have clothing allowances. They will make do with $100 million. And if you recommended that the amount of money that they are asking for was redirected to community safety, it would actually make their jobs easier. And I am in favor of defunding the police, but if the best we can do this year is saying no more money, that's the best we can do. So I highly encourage you to actually defund the police and just say no and recommend to City Council that any and all funds should be funneled into non-police responses to these crises, because that is what the evidence says, and that is all of the evidence that doesn't the police. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Oakes. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners to clarify any of the comments, questions for the speaker? All right. Thank you, Speaker. Madam Clerk, is Speaker Sue Gerler the next presenter?
Yes, they are. And they
very good.
are, they've been promoted to panelist. And I believe Sue is our last speaker. because our last speaker, we've attempted to contact them via email and they have not responded that they are going to be attending the meeting.
Very good. Speaker Gerler, the floor is yours.
Hello, my name is Sue. I live in District 5. I signed up very last minute because, once again, I do not want to be here because year and year again, you do not listen to public consultation. You do not take these really valid points that everyone puts forward into meaningful consideration. You do not follow the defunding report clearly. You do commission a bunch of reports that becomes presentations, becomes more presentations, becomes vague policies, work actions that don't actually get represented in the community as meaningful defunding and detasking. I was also very happy to see community response. I don't know what that actually looks like for community members in action, but again, that's a example of detasking, and detasking means defunding, which means moving resources away from the police. I will once again echo everyone else in saying that this budget that we're examining does not exist in a vacuum. The city is under so much pressure right now. I don't know if any of you ride the bus. Transit sucks. Fires have been going on. Everyone is struggling, and there's constantly in council budget discussions around if we want to enact our own transit plans, if we want to enact our own traffic strategies, and it comes down to budget. Yet the HRP budget keeps increasing every year with no actual oversight. I don't understand how the police is directed to public safety in the city. I don't know why there are two uniformed officers in my farmer's market every Saturday while I'm trying to buy eggplants. Like, I don't want to see them there. They don't make me feel safe, but I also don't understand how we have the resources to have uniformed officers in a farmer's market every week. This is Alderney Landing, that's my district. I don't understand how so many police officers can show up to nonviolent demonstrations in the city, to be decked out for events like homecoming, which a few people mentioned, but then still be like, we don't have enough resources to combat all the problems that we need to combat. There's no actual material oversight that the BOPC provides, in my opinion, for these budget increases. And yes, they do end up being a rubber stamp. And then when we're discussing budget in city council, words are said such as these have gone through meaningful discussions, and we've looked at the ARV and why we need it, and we just need to move this budget through, where that is not correct. There is no actual oversight. And one thing that's material that you can do today is to say, we need to look at this budget a bit better. We don't think what you're bringing is good enough, and we're not going to improve this increase until you kind of look at what you're spending money on, what you're not spending money on, and have more direction. The increase of $2 million or more can wait. We say this to you every year. Other departments have to deal with this all the time, and the city suffers for it every time. This budget can wait. It does not need to increase. Nothing exists in silo. Please hear these words. I just don't think you will. I just don't think you will take into public consideration every beautiful data that was brought, every beautiful argument that was brought today. You will say yes to this because chief of police said we need it, and you don't know what's needed very well because you don't have meaningful oversight over the budget. And these people who are first responders say to you that we need this money. And of course, the instinct is to provide the funds because these people respond to every crisis in the city. But it is a waste of money to have police respond to every crisis in the city. We know this. Fund other services that are also responding to crisis, but with less resources. There are counselors in this board that make those budget decisions. Just take a look at the police. Take a look at how that money is spent. Wages were mentioned, very high wages, insane that they get paid so much more than community service providers, look at the wages, look at what the money is spent for, look at what we actually
30
send
seconds
uniformed
remaining.
officers to. I don't know who is paying for their presence in the farmers market every week. Even if it's private money, they should not be wearing uniforms. I don't know what's happening with that, but there are examples of this. There are examples of them showing up to things that they don't need to be showing up in the force that they are showing up. So take a look. Do not increase the budget, because I don't think you have valid reason to increase the budget without actually looking at all the previous spendings. We are building upon previous years. We're building upon the budget being strained this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Are there any questions, points of clarification for the Speaker? All right. Madam Clerk, are there any other speakers for today's public consultation?
We had one more person on the speaker registration list, but they have not joined the Zoom meeting, and we've reached out to them via email and have not received a response.
Very good. Thank you for clarifying. I did want to note back to our Speaker Nicole Corrado, I think, that if she had any questions specific about the community safety program, she can email clerks, clerks@halifax.ca, and they'll direct her questions directly to community safety and have those answered for her. All right, well, let's move on with the formal part of the agenda. So I'm on to item number 11, added items, nothing there today. No in-camera session contemplated. Any notices of motion? Madam Clerk, has the clerk's office received any notice of motions prior to this session?
Chair O'Malley, I have not received a notice of motion from any commissioner.
Thank you. I should note that on October 29th, the next meeting of the BOPC, that will be the meeting where the actual budget will be presented and reviewed with a subsequent date if required in early November. So I think we're on to item 15, which is adjournment. Can I call for a mover?
Chair, before you do,
yes.
Sorry, I just because I'm new, I just have, I guess, a process or procedure question. So I didn't have any questions specifically for the speakers, but I did have some questions stemming from some of the points brought up. Is there an actual way for me to ask them? Like, do these need to be asked in this meeting, or do I bring them up separately? Just so I understand the process over.
Well, maybe I could ask our clerk to make a comment about the formality of commissioners' questions at this stage.
So commissioners, if you have a question that you wish to ask either the HRP or the RCMP HRD regarding their budget after the comments made by the speakers today, the next meeting on October 29th is when they'll be presenting their formal budget reports, where they'll be making recommendations in terms of how the board should proceed with their recommendations. And at that time, there will be discussion and debate. So you'll be able to ask your questions at that time. I believe Commissioner Carter had his hand raised as well, but he's lowered it.
Yes.
So perhaps I've answered.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Commissioner Carter, is there anything that you wanted to add or ask in relation to that?
Yeah, no, I think it was answered for me. My question was around the same things, just how do we discuss what was discussed today with the people who called in and have a discussion around that. And it was answered. It'll be done on the 29th.
Absolutely. And as well, you know, the comprehensive budget will be presented in advance of the 29th as part of your meeting package. There you'll be able to look at, examine the details of the budget line by line. And for Halifax Regional Police, and then for the RCMP, it is a resource increase request as opposed to individual line items just because of the funding model that's in place for there. And those will be treated as two separate motions. Each will be discussed, debated on its own and such. All right, any other questions from any of the commissioners? All right, the next thing is adjournment. Can I have a mover for an adjournment?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter and Commissioner Mancini. And I don't think we need to vote on that. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining in today's session.